I have had the joy of serving congregations of all sizes throughout the Midwest. And in each place, I have loved getting to find the metaphors that work just right for that place. I think my Indy 500 metaphor could use a little work. But it will take me living here through an Indy 500 season to understand it a little bit better. I have only been your minister for 135 days, after all. 135 days. Now, if you're like me, this simultaneously feels like yesterday and 2 years ago. Time is funny that way. Now, this sermon today is going to be a little bit different than many of my others because what I want to do in this sermon is to give you not a generic interim ministry overview like I gave you back when I started, but instead I want to let you know what some of the things are that I've been working on with you already these first 100-ish days. I want to share some of my observations and wonderings that I have with you, and then I want to talk briefly about what's next. So first, what have I and we been working on? You probably don't see a lot of it because it's behind the scenes. My first job as an interim minister is to get to know the congregation. I have met with over 100 of you so far in one-on-one meetings, in group meetings, and in committee or team meetings. That is nearly half this congregation. If you and I have not had a chance to interact or have a conversation, I would really like to do so. So please don't hesitate to reach out and schedule a time to meet with me. I have also met extensively with your staff. I have weekly or bi-weekly staff meetings with all of my direct reports. That's Mara, your congregational administrator, Sarah, your director of religious education, Linda, your music director, and Erica, your communications manager. And in addition to that, Mara and Sarah and I meet together each week so that we know what one another are doing and how we can support each other. I learned just last week that all three of us are Arieses. Aries. And so we have a lot of fun in our meetings. Your board and I are also tackling the job of updating the personnel handbook since the current one is over 10 years old and a lot has changed since then. Along the way, we're also making sure that all our systems like timesheets and benefits are in compliance with federal regulations. Good stuff. And I did an analysis for the board of staff salaries based on the 2023-2024 UUA recommendations. All of this and all of my board reports are available on the board Google Drive. I have been working with your board a lot. I love them. They are fantastic. You have a fabulous, fabulous board. They are all so dedicated and love this congregation so much. I led the board in a two-part orientation around governance, the duties of board members, and how to have efficient board meetings. And we talked about how congregation size impacts the model of governance. The board is trying out some of the recommendations we talked about to help increase transparency and efficiency, from reorganizing the Google Drive and storage to reviewing policies that need updating. And we're continuing to look at formalizing what has been pretty informal so that your governance structure can better meet the needs of a growing, vibrant congregation. We're also having really, really good conversations that get us wondering. We looked at the statistics of UUI membership from the start of the congregation till now. We looked at the membership numbers, the RE enrollment, and the budget over time, and we could see where really good things happened in the congregation, and we could see where really hard things happened in the congregation. This month, we're going to be discussing the book Serving with Grace by Eric Walker Wickstrom, and it's possible that we might do an all-congregation read on that book in a few months. It's really good, and it's really, really short. And I recommend it as a way to help reorient congregants in general to how people participate in co-creating your congregation, not as volunteerism, but as serving, as service. There have also been quite a few changes to the congregation, for the congregation and I to navigate already this year. For instance, your caring team and I have been working together to clarify processes and procedures because they lost two very key staff members, your former minister and your former outreach and care coordinator, both of whom the caring team worked together with really closely. And here I come, knowing nothing about how things used to be done and having different priorities for my time. And so we're trying to figure out how to meet the needs of the congregation together. And you've probably noticed some of the changes around worship that Sarah and I have done together with the worship associates and the religious education committee. I've made some tweaks to the order of service. We've been doing it for a little while now, so I appreciate all of you who waited patiently to offer your feedback. And if you want to give it to me, not this minute, but later, I welcome it. I've also been talking extensively with the worship associates team around what shared ministry in worship looks like and what the expectations will be for your new ministers' involvement when they arrive. Along the way, we have dealt with a couple of conflicts. I've sat in on lots of committee and team meetings and talked a lot about interim ministry. And I have a confession to make. Y'all are awesome. I love this congregation so much. UUI is an amazing congregation. You probably already know this, but it's nice to have somebody who has experience in a lot of other congregations come in and say, y'all are fantastic. I want to lift up that in many important ways, this congregation is healthy and thriving. I do things very differently than your previous minister did, and I'm asking questions that maybe you hear them differently, or maybe they haven't been asked for a while, and I'm noticing the spiritual and emotional maturity in this congregation when I ask those questions. For example, my sermon a few weeks ago on microaggressions was a really hard one to hear. And UUI folks have generally embraced it, even offering gratitude to me for the challenge. This is wonderful. You have a solid foundation upon which to be doing this interim ministry work. Through all these sermons and meetings and digging into your history and documents, there are a few things that I am noticing, things that keep coming up time and again that I think it's important to share with you. This is one of the tasks of the interim minister, to hold up the mirror so that you can see yourself in a different way. The one that has come up the most, by far the most, is that longtime volunteers want newer folks to step up and take on more of the key volunteer positions. Longtime volunteers say that they feel stuck in their leadership positions because newer folks aren't coming to fill them. But at the same time, the newer folks are saying that longtime volunteers are having a hard time stepping back and letting go. Yeah, see, there's a knowing laugh in here. The challenge for longtime volunteers is to understand that things are not going to get done the exact same way that you do them, and to discern when the right time is for you to step back and even let there be a hole for a bit, because that hole will allow newer members to come in and to make that position their own and to do it their way. The challenge for the newer folks is to step up and make this your congregation too. Did you know that the more you put into a church, the more you actually get out of it? Yes, that's true. And yes, it will get on your every last nerve in the process. And it's worth it. And we need all of you to be part of the pit crew. And who knows, maybe you can even help us shave off some time in our pit by finding new ways to do things. Another thing I'm noticing about UUI is that you have a difficult time talking about money. In the past, the people who gave more money in the past long history of the congregation, the people who gave more money were treated differently by the leadership of the congregation. And so you have gone in the opposite direction and maybe don't talk about it so much or as well. I want to let you know, you are not a poor, struggling congregation. You have a wealth of resources, both on the financial books officially, but also waiting to be tapped. Part of our task during this interim ministry will be to help you understand where you are financially so that you have an idea of where you want to be and where you can go. Connected to the finances are the issue of your facilities. 4 buildings and these extensive grounds is a lot to maintain. And right now, they are sitting empty for most of the week. This is a drain on both your financial and your volunteer resources. Figuring out how to sustain and even monetize your buildings and grounds is also something we will continue to work on. And you are struggling to figure out how to live your mission beyond and within your walls. How do you tackle the racism, trans and homophobia, and misogyny present in the congregation and in your state? What does it mean to truly live the 8th principle that you adopted that calls you to work to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions? You are leaning into these questions. And so this last observation I want to share before we dive into what's next is connected to this last one and may be a little bit harder to hear. Interestingly enough, the most critical feedback that I have gotten so far has been from older white men in the congregation. Don't get me wrong, some of it is absolutely valid and I appreciate it. But some of it is just downright defensive and anxious. Some of this is reflective of what is happening in our culture, and many white men are struggling and feel shamed for what you all feel you have earned. And some of you feel like it isn't fair now that other voices are being elevated above yours. But it wasn't fair before. It hasn't been fair that you have had more access and more opportunities because of your race and gender. It feels different to not be in the center, but that's what we're asking you to do. And I say stuff like this in my sermons a lot. And so I wonder how much of the pushback I may be getting is really misogyny. I wonder if you gave your previous minister, an oldish white guy, the same pushback. Now, if you yourself are an older white guy, and if, when you heard what I just said, if instead of wondering if maybe you might be acting out your culturally programmed internal misogyny in ways that you're unaware of, if instead you said to yourself, "It isn't misogyny, I love women," then I invite you to consider that maybe you have some internal work to do. And maybe you aren't as much of an ally as you like to consider yourself. Because saying "I love women" when confronted with a question about misogyny is much like saying you cannot be a racist because you have Black friends. And if you are a white guy who has been working on his internalized misogyny, thank you. And please keep calling your compatriots back into right relationship. I know that what I just said is a lot. And I know that some of us are very uncomfortable right now. And as I said earlier, one of the things that I already love about this congregation is that y'all rise to a challenge. And I trust that you will rise to the one that I just laid before you. Because y'all are awesome. And I have faith in you. And yes, we are going to keep talking about these things, hard things, together. Because y'all can do hard things. And because the world needs you to do hard things. which leads me to this last section of the sermon, a preview of what is coming up in these next 18 months together. I promise it won't all be hard. The newly commissioned transition team and I will be working together to give you opportunities to claim, grieve, celebrate, and honor this congregation's past, both the recent past and farther back, through ritual and through naming past successes and struggles. And we will keep naming the many, many strengths that this congregation has. We will continue to dive into some of the governance and structural challenges that are inhibiting your congregational growth. I will be working with the board to continue to make things more efficient and more transparent. And we're going to be pulling out some older policies that haven't been looked at in a while and dusting them off and evaluating how they meet the needs for today. We're going to talk about a lot of things, like what does right relationship mean? What does it mean to be a covenantal faith? What does it mean to be kind instead of nice? And why is that important? And we're going to have other sorts of training as well, and adult faith formation. Beginning in January, we will be engaging in the curriculum called Transgender Inclusion in Congregations from the Transforming Hearts Collective. You will be hearing about it soon. We're going to be doing training on transformative worship. And hopefully by next fall, we're going to be talking about developing a pastoral care associates program to support the pastoral care work that I have and that the caring team is doing. And we're going to talk a lot about who UUI wants to become, what you are growing towards, because this will not only give the congregation a more clear direction, it will help inform what qualities you are looking for in your next minister. And of course, I will be working with the board on what your options are for your next minister. There are 3 possible paths that you could choose. You could go the traditional route and call a settled minister. You could choose something called contract to call. But I'm also beginning to wonder, I don't know, but I'm beginning to wonder if you might not be a good candidate for something called developmental ministry, which is a new category of ministry that is very focused, usually for a 3 to 5 year span, where the congregation identifies specific goals that it wants to work on that is larger than what can be covered in interim ministry. We don't know yet what ministry is next for UUI, and that is okay. We will take this one day at a time together, and we will do really good ministry together in the next 18 months. We will tackle the challenges set before us with love and tenacity, because that is who you are, and that's who I am. We will cry, and we will celebrate, and we will demand better from each other. We will fail countless times, and yet we will get up, and we will try again. We will wonder together, and we will work together, because we are all in this shared ministry together, working as a team to get this race car across the finish line. May it be so. May we, all of us, make it so together.